Hi, my friend, and welcome to the fourth episode of the Good Girl Syndrome show. I am so excited to be back today. Um, if you don't know me, my name is Julie Vander Meulen or Julie Vander Meulen, depending on where you are in the world. And today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be building on this week's theme. So, for this week, we were talking about resting and not feeling guilty. So, good girls have a tendency to not like to rest and to feel very guilty when they do rest, and or have some sorts of stories, that make them feel shameful if they do rest or if they're not productive or something like that. And earlier this week, on Wednesday, I had a coaching session with Madison, for Madison. And we talked about her own relationship with rest. And, she was asking me how she would be able to rest, basically. And I gave her a few tips and a few tools that if you are interested in, you can go and watch and you can use them as well. Today, what I'm going to do, so the Sunday version of this show is always me using the same theme as the rest of the week. And I'm talking about how it applies to me. So, how I deal with that specific pattern of good girl syndrome. And then, this is released every Sunday. And on the very same day, every Sunday, you also receive my newsletter. If you're not subscribed, you can go in the description box and you can find all the links to all the things that I do for free or not for free. One of the things that I do for free is I have a Sunday Sanctuary newsletter. If you're here because of that, hi, I'm very happy to see you. Have quite a community there, and yeah, you will see every Sunday in the newsletter. You will have some practical exercises and reflective questions on how to apply what I'm talking about now and what I talked about on Wednesday with Madison, um, to your own life, like concrete examples and exercise that you can use for you. So it's like a mini workbook every single week that you receive in the newsletter. So on to today's theme. So my relationship with rest. I tried to think of what could be interesting. Like if I was on the other side, what would be interesting to me to hear about? And I thought perhaps I can share a little bit about my rest journey in general, to begin with. So if we start from when I was a child, I was a very playful child, as probably many, many children in the world. I was a bit restless, but from an excited point of view. So I did whatever I wanted, right? So I went to sleep. I had a normal relationship to sleep, I would say. And then things started to change because of some traumatic events in my life. I started having nightmares. So my relationship to rest started to change from that. So I know that it does not apply to every single one of you, but I know that some of you struggle with the same types of things that I did, and I still do sometimes. Nightmares, like some dreams that you can't fully remember, but you still feel the emotional types of things, right? That still linger, and things like that, right? And so I did too, and that started shifting how I felt about going to sleep, if you see what I mean. So I started not liking it as much because first I was also afraid of the dark, so I did not like going to bed and being in the dark. That scared me. It took me a long time to fall asleep, and then when I would wake up, I would often like wake up from a nightmare or wake up with like all the different emotions that I felt from sleep. Um, and then fast forward in my life, there was a point. So I was a pretty lazy. I was a more of a tough kid growing up, especially my teenage years. And so when I entered university at 18, I was not studying. I was not doing anything, which is very funny because I ended up having four master's degrees and I almost finished a PhD and so on. So, I mean, my road really changed when I started university. But when I first started, I was not a good student. So I was just, sleeping whenever I wanted to. I was not sleeping. Like I didn't have a specifically difficult relationship with sleep. At least I did not see that, and I was not aware that me having all these nightmares and so on, that it was a symptom of like some of the traumas that I had not processed, right? I was not aware of that until about 10 years ago. So to me that was pretty normal. And when things started to change is that I shifted my identity. I was talking about shifting identities earlier this week with Madison. And there I shifted my identity consciously without knowing the tools that I shared with you the other day. And how I shifted it was I went from being a tough kid who didn't think I would ever amount to anything to actually starting to believe, thanks to some of my teachers, that actually I had a good mind and I was really good at analyzing novels. So my first studies were in languages and literature. I was very good with languages since I was little. Um, and just naturally without studying. And I was very good at analyzing novels just because I loved that. Like I loved doing that. Like every summer, I would be reading all the books that I hadn't read during the year because I was such a rebel. And so, I kind of find my path there. And in doing so, I started becoming someone else. I started becoming someone who was very studious. The good girl started becoming for me. So I wasn't always like that. It just, I became that. And I received a lot of positive reinforcement for being a good girl from different, you know, from university, of course. That was really very well rewarded for me to be studying hard, to be very good at what I was doing, like all these different things that a good girl is usually good at. They were very useful for me in that environment, but also in my family, culturally, right? Um, I'm also Greek. I'm half Greek, so a lot of traditional values that I inherited from that kind of reinforced this idea of being a good girl as well and behaving in specific ways, taking care of the elders and so on. Really good things, right? But the mix that I made in my mind was not necessarily the best. And so from then on, my relationship with sleep started to change and with rest in general. So I started not sleeping as much because I had a lot of things to do. I kind of piled my masters. I did them two by two. And so yeah, for 3 or 4 years there, I wasn't sleeping much and I also wasn't resting much because between doing two master's degrees, which wasn't that easy, at least for me, um, and then also working on the side, I wanted to work on the side. I also had a boyfriend, long-term boyfriend at the time. I was living with my family. I was helping out. Like I was doing a lot of things. And so from the outside, I looked really, really successful and like everything was going really well inside myself, it was one of the worst times of my whole life. Like how I was feeling constantly for those years was absolutely horrible. And so I can dive into different aspects of that in later episodes. But this is where my relationship with rest started to change because I was receiving so much validation from being this superwoman type of girl, no supergirl, no, always like on top of things and capable of doing all these things and these masters and going from one discipline to the other. And I'm not saying everything was perfect and everything was good. It wasn't, but overall it was pretty impressive. And I got really addicted to that. And in order to sustain that, I needed to let go of a lot of the healthy habits that I used to have. And I started having a lot of really destructive habits, one of which was I stopped sleeping as much. I was sleeping way, way less because I thought that that was a really cool hack that I could have like more time to study, more time to do other things, right? Um, but also less time to rest. Like I started developing this weird thing where at the same time there were moments because I also had phases where I was depressed and I was chronically anxious, right? So I had phases where I had a lot of lows and a lot of highs, right? Lows and very, very low lows and very high highs. And so I started developing this not so healthy pattern of like having high highs and low lows where I would be able to do like cram every single thing that I needed to do in a very, very short amount of time because I had trained myself from before from all the things that I had done. So I knew I was capable of doing that. And I was using a lot of the stress and the adrenaline, right, to like not be sleeping and doing all these things. And then by the end of, for example, exam season or whatever it was, I had my eyes twitching. I had migraines like about like half the month. I had all these different types of symptoms. Um, and I was just not resting. Like for this whole period, I was just not resting. And then in the down phases, I was sort of resting because I could lay in bed the whole day and like watch series and stuff like that. It was not a good phase of my life. Um, but I was not feeling rested. And all the time that I was in my bed, for example, it's not like I was sleeping. I was constantly like debating whether I should get up or not, like whether I should like all the things I should do, I should do. And then I wasn't doing it because I was avoiding it, right? So I really wasn't resting. If anything, it was making me feel even more anxious and even more restless. So in the end, I went out of that, right? Of this phase. This now is a long time ago. But there's aspects of that that I've kept with me. So to me nowadays, if I think about how I feel about rest, this is one of the biggest areas that I'm working on right now. So I'm really not a guru speaking about this topic. I'm really coming from a place of I'm learning with you. Like there's some things that I have applied and I know what to notice in myself and also in others, but I'm very much learning the practice of taking care of myself and not being neglectful and not like um not being so quick at dismissing sleep and dismissing moments of rest and like listening to my body. It's a new thing for me. It's been perhaps like I would say I've started this journey 3 years ago, and I've been really, really more intentional about it and really thinking about it for the past, I'd say, 9 8 9 months. Since I met my boyfriend um, sometime in January. And so from then on, because he's very health focused and he has helped me a lot with some of like the things that he thinks about. And, he influenced me in many beautiful ways, including this one. And so for me, what I kept from this story, like why I told you this story about me, is one, it gives you a bit more context about the good girl and like how it came about and, different bits and pieces, which I know you like to hear. But also because there's two stories that I created from that. So I already was raised in an environment where both my parents are hard workers and raised us to be hardworking people, my sister and I, both of us. They really value that. They value being courageous. They value being out there. They value not being lazy, all these things. So originally, already, there was some conditioning from my family of like, when you should rest, when you shouldn't rest, how much rest is appropriate. Like, all there were different rules, right, that were ingrained in me, so that would already make me feel guilty if, for example, I would sleep. It's very, very rare in my life. I think it happened perhaps 3 times in my life that I slept until 11 a.m. Every time. I'm sure that if it happened to me again, my first reaction would be I feel guilty because of that story that belongs to my family, right? But then the stories I created from my own history were number one, that I got scared of rest as a way to avoid life, because that's what I was doing when I was depressed and anxious, right? And so I was all day in bed, what I described to you. I was all day in bed, and that wasn't rest, right? But in my mind, I made a connection, I made a shortcut that if I rest and I stay in bed or I'm not productive, that then perhaps I'm slipping back into that old habit of mine that I had back then. And it's been years now, but it's still somewhere in my head, right? Then I'm like, is this allowed? Is this a sign of something? I get a little paranoid about that. Um, and the second thing is that because before, I had that shift of identity when I became a good girl, when I was, I don't know, perhaps 19 or something like that. Um, I did not want to be the lazy person that I was before, because before I was not a hardworking person. I was quite lazy. I was never studying. I was never doing anything good, right? I was on a rougher type of, path. I was always trying to cheat and not do things, like I was that type of person. And so I have tried to like not be that person very, very hard since I was 19 years old, always trying to prove that I was worthy and I was not lazy, like all these different things. Some of the stories are connected to medicine session that we did on Wednesday. I have some of those same beliefs. Um, and so that's what used to run in my head. And so it made me, oh, and perhaps a third belief that is very important is what I failed to say before is that how I perceived what was happening to me, right? With the me having all those migraines and being in bed all day and so on. To me, it was like my body was failing me. I could not make the connection in my mind um, that actually I was causing that like my behaviors were causing what was happening to my body. I did not understand that. I was seeing the other way around. I was seeing my body as my enemy. I was seeing my body as like this really annoying thing. I'll say it like that, annoying thing that I need to live with. And that's putting obstacles to what my mind actually wants. And so I think that that is also like all of these beliefs together make it so that one, I was not listening to the signals of my body because I thought it was just an annoying thing that was in the way, right? And I was just, ugh, I was just like popping pills to remove the migraines, which was changing nothing. If anything, it was aggravating some of the other things that were happening to my body. Um, Two, I was avoiding at all costs at being lazy. And so any moment that I would like relax, I would be like, no, like because we're not this person anymore. So I was really compensating to not be that person. Um, uh, and then yeah, these different things, and then the depressive episodes, right? The depressive episodes shaped me into thinking of being paranoid of perhaps I'm going back. Like if I'm resting, perhaps I'm going backwards on my path. So you can see that in my path, there's a lot of striving and a lot of fixing. I was fixing myself constantly. I was trying to not be who I used to be, right? That shapes a lot of my whole life experience. And so the thing that was constantly running in my mind, the assumption there was that there was something wrong with me, right? There was something wrong with me. And so I was always running forward from what I thought was my true self. So I was trying to be better than what I thought my nature was. A little bit dark, right? But it's how it was created. And I know that many of you have your own version of a dark story. So I think it's worth mentioning, right? Um, so these were the stories that were in my mind. Nowadays, how this manifests is I don't, the lazy story is kind of gone. I mean, I can have moments when, I'm like, are you being lazy? But I'm okay with it now. That part is fine. I'm much, much better with the other part of slipping into something else, although I'm still watchful. There's still a part of me that is not relaxed about that. I'm still afraid that that could happen to me again. So it's a work in progress. Um, and I don't know how it has changed for me in my life right now is that I still have it's more the story like we saw with Madison that I don't have time. I'm trying to do many things. I'm a very goal-oriented person, right? A lot of it came from me trying to fix myself when I was younger. And so I became extremely driven as a person because I was always trying to, make things better, make me better, make, everything better all the time, which was very really good in many ways, right? It's a competence and it's a talent in many ways. It gave me many skills and a specific mindset. In some ways, it's quite destructive because then um, I have, or at least I used to have, these huge goals. I still have huge goals. But for example, for a normal person, they would be super ambitious and have like one really big goal or like two, perhaps five, no? For me, I had like in a month, if it I create systems. So I would have like and I'm talking about this like, it's not so long ago. It was like 6 months ago. I still had that system where I was creating. I had 12 categories of my life that I wanted to like make some progress on. For each of them, I had 3 goals per month. That means 36 goals every single month, all of them really big. So it's no, it's no wonder that I tend to progress really fast, right? But it's also no wonder that then there is no time. Like literally there is no time if you're trying to do all these things on top of trying to have a family, trying to have, a partner, trying to be somewhat healthy, all these different things, trying to have some friends, all these different things. Um, and so to me, the pattern in my life still right now, even though it's not to the extreme that it was a few months ago, um, is still this type of story that I there's no time. So there's no time because, I'm doing this one thing. I have a hard time sometimes. Um, how can I say that? Like I see things in my calendar. I can see that the timeline, is going to be short, but I do not want to accept it. There's something of this sort that I do not want to accept that then, if now, for example, tomorrow I will be starting a seminar with Tony Robbins for 8 days, which means 8 days of very intense training and me facilitating things and being on my computer like that and dancing and teaching and coaching all day long for about 14 to 16 hours is how the program works for 8 days, right? I will have to wake up at 5. I will have to start this at 6. It's intense. It ends in the evening very late. I still have some training to do afterwards to prepare. In the midst of that, I need to take care of my dog. It's very intense, right? And still, so the assumption would be take a day off before, take a day off after, right? Rest. My thing is I'm filming this right now with you, right? It's 5:30. It's okay. It's not too late. But this morning woke up at 4, right? So I woke up on my own because I know that I have so many things to do. Just woke up. Just didn't put my alarm to wake up this early. It just so happened because it's in my mind that there is no time. So this is what I'm working with right now, where I'm still, so that you have some transparency on my journey. So clearly I still have some way to go. But what I would say has changed a lot for me is in the past few months compared to when I had my 36 goals compared to now what I have. Now I have for the year, and every month, every week I try to progress on that. Um, what has changed is different things. I would say the most important thing has been listening to my body. Um, and trying, like, number one, I would say how perceive my body. So I said that I used to perceive my body as an enemy, as an inconvenience, as something annoying, right? Something that was in the way of my mind. And now I see it as the wisest part of me. Like, I've shifted. I was doing that with medicine, like my belief system, right, around my body. I changed that. I transformed it into, actually, my body is very, very wise. It has a type of wisdom that my mind does not have, right? My mind does not want to cooperate with my body right now, right? Because it's not trained in this way. And so shifting that has made me more conscious of what is happening to my body, and like perceiving these as signals. So, for example, if I can, you can usually feel when I'm about to have a migraine. And so I feel a lot of tension in my head. And so before I would just push through, or I would just take a pill so that I'm sure that it doesn't bother me and I can continue what I do. It's simple things, right? It's simple things to do. But now I stop. And I can't explain to you how hard, or perhaps if you're in the same situation, if you're watching this video, probably you are in some version of that, how hard it was for me to do that. Like the thing in my mind of thinking, so now I will go like to bed and I will rest when I don't even have the full symptom yet, was like, it seemed like such a waste of time. And I kept having these thoughts of like, should I, all the shoulds, like I should be doing this. And now I'm in my bed, and I'm doing this. Like the same type of things that I was thinking were back when I was depressed, right? And I was in university. Same type of logic applied to a different thing, like repetitive pattern of like, there's something wrong. Like I need to be productive. And also, I would say the other thing was that then when I actually rested, when I was resting, um, I did not recognize my body as well. So, for example, sleeping more hours meant I woke up and like it was different. My experience of waking up was different, and how my mind was working was different. And so there was for me a period of like, changing the things that are happening in my head, like the thoughts of like, I should be doing this, I should be doing that, versus I want to take care of my body and my body is wise, right? That's one of the shifts. But I would say that there was also a shift in terms of getting used to how it feels when you are rested. And it feels completely different, and it feels good, and it also feels unknown. I mean, to me, it felt completely unknown. And I think that a lot of us, with rest or with anything else, when things feel uncomfortable, we take it as a sign that there's something wrong, right? Because good girls tend to love a lot of certainty. We love control. We love knowing how things work. And so, in some twisted way, at least for me, I'm not talking about you, but at least for me, in some twisted way, I was used to my patterns. Like I knew how my body behaved. I knew how my mind behaved. I knew exactly what to do, not to feel the things. Um, and I would only rest when like my migraine once a month is like 3 days long, and like, I really can't do anything. And so I need to cancel most of the things and so on and so forth. For that period of time, I would rest, perhaps a day or out of the 3 days, right? But so there was this whole debate inside of me of like, is this normal? Why am I feeling like this? And instead of feeling happy and like rested and like you see in the movies of like, oh my God, this is such a great experience. Sometimes it felt like that. Most of the times it felt like I just wasted time, or like I was a bit groggy or something. Like I was not as fast. And so I needed to change my whole relationship with time. Um, And I needed to learn to trust my body, and needed to trust to be like to feel, and to train myself to feel like it's okay, actually, Julie. Like, you are, it's okay if there's like fluctuation, that there's phases where if I'm learning to rest and I'm learning to do things, it's okay if like sometimes I work less than other times, right? It seems again very simplistic, but to me it was also a training in itself. And it goes back to me thinking that I was lazy when I was younger, right? That it's like if you're used to, even if you think that it's fine, like I could be coaching anyone, right? I could be coaching anyone and be saying you really need to rest, right? Because I really believe in that. And I read the articles, I read the different things. Like I know that it's really good for you, and I know it's really good for me. But then for me practicing it, it it created a whole array of discomfort. And I think that a lot of healing and changing and growing is about that, is about going into discomfort, a type of discomfort that we think we can interpret as like we're regressing, or there's something wrong with what we're doing, or we're not on the right path, right? Because it's not a known path, and because it doesn't feel as good as what we can see from what other people are experiencing and what they're showing, right? um, and so to me that was the most difficult adjustment, I would say, to learning to rest. um, and the except for doing the thing, like doing it even though it was uncomfortable, I think that for me to do it day after day after day, and to trust that that was a form of growth, like it helped me a lot to reframe it as a form of growth as well, that I was healing and I was growing, like I'm growing as a person. If I can not be, at least it's how I think about things, if I cannot be um how can I say, conditioned by my old patterns and my old beliefs, right? And so that belief in itself that I am actually growing when I'm doing this really helped me stick with it and like see the transformation day after day after day. And I think the second thing is repetition. It's like the fact that I kept doing it day after day after day, which is something that I learned, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago, the power of compounding. I learned from investing and understanding how investments work, right? So money, and understanding, that like things can grow over time. And so if you take the same action over and over and over again, not only does it stack, but usually tends to grow faster, because at some point, like this stacking creates like there's exponential growth at some point. And so this belief and this inner knowing that it works like that for knowledge, it works like that for many things, it works like that for your muscles, it works like that for money, that this was a principle that was applied to most of life, that can be applied to most of life, helped me a lot. Because then I was thinking, okay, so perhaps right now it's really painful, right? And I don't see any progress. If anything, I feel like I'm regressing. At least I had the knowledge that if I continue and continue and continue, at some point this is going to pay off in some way. And it did. So right now, I'm happy to report that I have way less migraines than I used to have. I can spot my migraines in advance, and I'm now tailoring most of my workflow with what is happening. So I do a lot of my work in advance, because, in part, because of that, so that I can have the freedom. If, like right now, I have a tension in my head, right, that I can like take it slow, or perhaps not have to work right now. All these different things. That helped a lot. And then perhaps another thing that I would say is, you've probably heard this a lot about like, if you have a destructive habit, the easiest, like what you will tend to do is, if you manage to remove it, either it will come back, or it will be replaced by something else. And so the something else is, if you leave it to chance, most probably will become another destructive habit. So for me, sometimes when I would be switching that, I could be overeating. Like it was mixed with different things that went together with that type of lifestyle and that type of identity. And so where I'm going with this is that then, if you want to change this habit, right, and you want to rest more, and you want to be okay with the fact that you are not working, which was my story. My story was I was constantly working, not just doing things outside, but mainly just working and thinking about work. Do something else that is good for you. Like it's very, again, it sounds very simplistic, but it changes everything. So for me, I walk an hour and a half every single day. And I go with like, I don't reply to emails, I don't do anything. I'm just there. I'm like looking at nature. I'm looking at my dog, Leo, that you saw in the previous episode. Um, if I want, I speak out loud if there's no one. Like, I think about what I'm grateful for. Like, I occupy my mind with like really cool things that make me feel good and that make me feel like in some way it is still productive, if you see what I mean, right? I would just replace what productivity means to me. And so nowadays, and perhaps I can finish on this note, for me nowadays, what productivity means, is like rest is a form of productivity for me nowadays, right? I'm still learning. You heard about all the different patterns and how thoughts come to my mind. But I would say that nowadays, I was able to reshape this story where I think that like pretty much everything that makes me happy is productive. So I'm not saying like if I watch TV for 10 hours in a row, I'm not going to think that this was productive, even though if this happens like once in a while and I spend those 10 hours and I had a really, really good time, right? And I was so like, it was just so exciting. And I was spending time with my partner or with my family and so on. Like that was productive actually. Because I was like, we call that in the Tony Robbins world net timing, which means no extra time. So that you bundle basically activities together and that way you gain time. And so to me, that helps me a lot too in this twisted little productive oriented mind. That helps me. It's also a hack for me to be able to be okay with the fact that, uh, I'm not actually resting or perhaps I'm not reading a book like that. But if I'm bundling them, that really helps me. So, for example, I can go on a walk and, like I said, do all these things. And I've done like 5 different items in like 1 hour, right? And plus, I was really good with my body. Plus, I was outside. Like, I checked so many boxes in one go that the growth minded part of me is feeling extremely, extremely empowered and extremely, extremely proud, right? And so it's like rerouting what I think is productive and kind of playing with my own mind. And so that's what I would say to you is out of all of the things that I mentioned today, I don't know if anything resonated with you, but perhaps the first thing I would say is that there is some hope, right? If you had a dark phase like I did before, there is some hope, not just because you see me, but you know, for me, it helps me a lot when I see other people who went through similar types of phases or similar types of circumstances and so on. It helps me a lot sometimes, especially when I'm feeling down, to know, okay, so this person is a normal person. They're not like way up there, right? And they managed to do that, right? They managed to get out of that, and like, it really helps me. So one, there is hope. Um, Two, listen to your body. I think it's like the next step. If you're struggling with rest, I would say listen to your body. Learn to like see your body as a friend, right? And really listen to her or to it. I don't know how you would say it. I say to her. And like see what are the signals that she's giving to you. What is she saying to you? Because it's like a communication, right? And so yeah, what can you learn from that? What is your body telling you? And what haven't you been listening to? What haven't you heard for many years? And there's some pain to that. So expect that when you make a change, what I was talking about, perhaps that's the third point, is that even in this domain, I think there is some pain and some healing to be done and some acceptance to be done at like, seeing how badly you treated your body, how little you respected yourself in many different ways, right? There's all these thoughts, and then adjusting to the newness of it and the discomfort of like not knowing the sensations and needing to redo these patterns in your mind, the thoughts that you have. And so that leads me to number four, which is repetition, right? That probably it's not going to work from the first time, or it might work if you're really excited and but then after some time you will need to reinforce that again and again and again. And that is part of the process, because if you think about it, I don't know how old you are, but I'm 34 years old right now, which means that for about 33 years, I have lived with some form of conditioning around um, you know sleep and rest that I had not consciously chosen, right? And so, if I've been reinforcing this every single day for 33 years, I think it would be fair to, assume and give that it's going to take a little bit of time, and to give myself and my body some grace to adjust to this change, right? It's going to take a few days, it's going to take a few weeks or a few months, right? And also that it keeps growing. Like mix it. If my fifth tip for you would be find your own version of what I do with myself. Like this little trick and this little game that I do of what I call net timing, the Tony Robbins concept, no extra time, really, really helps me feel peaceful about it all. Like I feel like I'm still winning, like this overachiever thing is still feeling reassured, right? And so I don't know if you have this overachiever side of you, most probably yes. So if you have that, find your own version of what works for you in terms of like net timing and bundling different things and stacking, right? And if you don't have an overachiever side, but you have something else, find a way to comfort that part of you, right? So you is basically you're creating. If we go back to Madison's session on Wednesday, is like you're creating a new identity of the girl who rests, whatever is the term for her that you have, versus the busy bee or the exhausted girl, whatever it is, right? Um, and um, on top of that identity that you've just created, you also want to give love to that old identity, the exhausted one. For me, it can be the exhausted one, um, because she served you. She helped you in a phase, like it's a survival mechanism. And so it was created for a reason. I'm not saying we want to keep it, but I'm saying we do want to love that part of ourselves and we want to accept it and we want to understand it, and we want to move away from her in a way that is she's going to keep coming back. Basically, if we see them as like as an animation, she will leave for a time and then she will come back, and then you'll have to have that conversation between the two to say it's okay. Like the new version of me, the rested version of me, knows how to take care of me, right? And you can rest, like I've got this, some version of that, of reassurance to that old part of you, basically. So yeah, that was my journey with health. That is still my journey with health. And with my health journey is very related to rest and to taking care of myself, and in taking care of myself there is like sleep and like taking breaks and not neglecting some of my needs, right? All of these different things, and I'm sure I'll talk about different aspects, like depending on your questions and the topic that come up. I'm sure I'll talk about different aspects of my health and different things that are changing in my life, and what's been working for me, like, how the experience has been, so that you get a little bit of transparency on what it actually looks like if you're on a similar journey to me or on a similar journey to what I was doing before, so that hopefully like it gives you some hope, and it also gives you some tips, and it also gives you some sort of realistic expectation of like how things might happen. You will have your own version, it won't look exactly like mine, but at least you have another perspective, rather than just the perfect picture type of thing. You put your alarm on and like you meditate or whatever it is, and then you feel even worse because you can't achieve that ideal that you see. So hopefully that creates that for you. I think I'm going to stop here because I've talked enough, and I think I've replied to the different types of questions that I have had received around that, and what I would personally have loved to receive, and to understand. If you enjoyed this episode, please put a little thumbs up, or write me in the comments if you can relate to any part of that, or if you just want to say hi, just say hi. I love seeing you, whatever it is that you write. If you're not subscribed yet, please subscribe to my channel. And I think that's it, my friend. I will go eat and get some rest. And I suggest you do too if it's the right time for you to do that. And I will see you next Wednesday. Bye bye.